Welcome back to the Sports Card Grinders show here at RotoGrinders. I'm Dean, your host once again. Joined today, it's an intimate show. It's just three of us today talking sports cards. Of course, you guys know this, the site here on YouTube, youtube.com. That's you guys are watching this. Hey, feel free to like and subscribe. Talk to us in the comment section. We much appreciate that. Tell us what you want us to hear, what you want to hear on future shows. So, hey, we normally talk about daily fantasy sports here at RotoGrinders. We do branch out and talk about sports cards as well. Batting first, joining the show, leading off, it's Simon. What's going on, dude? Simon, how are things in your world?
Good, man. Good. We got a lot of cards to show off today. Just kind of taking a look at what some of our previous recommendations have been doing, and then taking a look at the general state of some of these NBA cards and whatnot. So it should be a pretty interesting show.
Yeah, we're going to be talking about a brand new card that's going to be out there, the NFL Mosaic. We're also talking about basketball. You know, we're winding down, obviously, in the bubble. Currently, as we're recording this, we're down to 4 teams, and I think the Lakers and Denver are playing tonight. This is a Tuesday evening, so depending on where you guys are, when you guys listening to it, it might be 2-1, it might be 3-0. Who knows what's going on as far as that series? But we'll be talking about the NBA bubble, and of course, the NFL is underway. Week 2 is in the books. We talk about some players that that we recommended in the past, and see how that's working out for us. And we have an eye on some injuries, and maybe a couple of players that maybe have our eye on as far as projecting going forward as far as getting a jump in the sports card market. That said, Brennan, what's going on, dude? How are things in your world? Everything all good?
Yep, everything's good. We're just taking it day by day, and man, it just seems like the market is evolving in front of our eyes. So it's an interesting time to be a fan of both sports cards and sports in general.
All right, Brennan. First topic, we teased we're talking about some basketball, talk about some football. Before we do that, let's talk about the grading company, Brennan, PSA. Now, this is your observation. This is not officially, like, they didn't go to the AP and send this out there. But from what you can tell, and tell us why, your opinion on this, you think that their grading system is tightening a little bit. And what does that mean going forward?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things I like to do throughout the day, if I can have something up on the background on the TV, is look at people reviewing their PSA submissions. And there's a couple of reasons for it. One, I want to see what's hot. So, like, what are people submitting? Are people submitting Mosaic, or are people still sticking to their guns with things like Prism and Select and Optic? But a side effect of all of this, which I've started to learn, is you get a feel for how the grades are doing. Now, obviously, some people like to submit just anything, and other people are very strict with what they do. But I've seen several people on YouTube revealing their submissions that they are seeing their gem rates, which is what percent of your total cards come back 10s. They're seeing their gem rates decline pretty significantly. And one person has submitted over, I think, 1,000 cards. And he has said early on he was getting gem rates around 50, 60%. And now it's down to around 30 or 40. So these are pretty significant changes if they're true. And I think if you think about it from a PSA perspective, they're catching a lot of heat for the Luka Doncic PSA 10 pop count, which is, I believe, up over 14,000 now or close to it. And there's only about 22,000 total cards graded. So you're looking at a gem rate on modern cards of potentially 60% or more, which kind of devalues a 10. And so what I'm seeing anecdotally, again, we can't prove this, and maybe it'd be interesting to put together a more serious analysis, is that PSA is tightening their standards, and they're giving a lot more 9s where they might have in the past been grading them out as 10s.
So I assume that means that 10s now would increase value. And we were talking about this pre-show. I was asking the question. I was curious if there is like a stamp, like a date that tells you when the card was graded, because in my brain, when you suggest that, and of course, like you're saying, they're not coming out and telling us, hey, we're now being more strict, but maybe the market can understand that a PSA, 10 3 years ago may be different than a PSA 10 today. Maybe the one from 3 years ago would be the cost would be different. Maybe, who knows? I was just kind of throwing that idea out there, but that's not even a thing. That's not something anybody's sort of like trying to figure out. So does this increase the values of 10s if they're going to be going down as far as the population?
Yeah, I think for some of the modern stuff, especially from 2018 and 2017. The impact to the value of the 10 is going to be slow, because what you're going to see is the supply of 9s is going to be increasing much faster than it was in the past, and the 10s is going to be increasing at much of a slower rate But when you're already starting at pop counts, like for a Luka at 13,000, and I believe 4,000 or 5,000 for the PSA 9s, you're not going to see a huge jump overnight, especially with just the volatility as it is from performance. It's going to be kind of hidden in all the other movements in the market. Long term, I think this means a couple of things. I think that people are going to be less enthusiastic to get everything graded. If it's got a dinged corner or a small imperfection or it's slightly off center, if you feel like your chances of getting a 10 or less, you might actually choose not to submit that card to begin with. And so potentially overall the pop counts could be lower. And I think we might look back 2, 3, 4 years from now, and future sets, the PSA 10s are going to be higher value than relative to PSA 9s, which right now the modern ratio is PSA 10s are about 3 times a PSA 9. I think that number for the cards that are already out are going to slowly creep up towards 4, I'd imagine, over the next several months or maybe a couple of years. But I think future sets, 10s, if this is true, are going to be more rare and probably be trading at 4 or 5 times the value of a 9. And I think that could mean, we've got to be a little bit more careful about what we submit because 9s are sometimes very close to raws in value. So you might be drawing dead or breaking even and not having possession of that card for a long time. But I think over the long term, we're going to look back, and this is a great decision by PSA because I think 10s should be rare, at least more rare than 9s.
So, yeah, and you were talking about this pre-show as well, too. There's no 9.5, which I was surprised to learn. I was not aware of that. And then you're talking about that maybe they'll move to a 9.5 system, but also that might be too late. It's probably too late at this point. We shall see. But what about if I believe your premise to be true, and I want my card graded, and I think it might be on the bubble, why not send it to a different grading company?
Well, so the biggest reason to dissuade you from SGC is their resale values, even at similar grades, is not close to PSA right now. So if you were to get an SGC 10, that will sell on the resale market for about 50 to 60% of a PSA 10.
Okay.
So the problem is the resale on SGC just isn't there right now. It might catch up in the future, but it's just not there yet. The market has kind of spoken that PSA is the big thing. Now, BGS is interesting because a 10 looks a lot better on a label than a 9.5, and 9.5 is an option at BGS. So a lot of times when they're on the fence, they'll give you a 9.5. I'd be interested to see, and I haven't looked at pricing for BGS versus PSA and if that's a big deal, but if this is true and 10s are harder to get at PSA, BGS might be an option, a very savvy option, because a 9.5 in theory is going to be just as good as a PSA 10 if you're going to get it at a higher rate. So if I send 100 cards to PGS and I get a 9.5 or better on 50% of them, that's probably better than sending those same 100 cards to PSA and getting 10 on 30%. So it would be interesting to see if BGS now reaps some benefits from this. I just don't see the resale there for SGC to even justify sending them in there just yet.
All right, Simon, a lot to digest here. First of all, do you believe that Brennan's premise? Does this theory hold some water? And if true, what are you doing with that information?
I think it makes a lot of sense if it is true, just because of the amount of demand that has increased for these grading companies and everybody sends their cards in now. Everybody sends these huge loads of cards into these grading companies. And so they're suddenly finding themselves with a huge sample size, whereas in the past, they didn't have as many cards to judge. So I think in addition to wanting to increase the value of their 10 grades, they've also had a lot more cards to look at and to compare with. So I think naturally they can, develop higher standards for what they're giving these 10s to just based on the volume that they're looking at. And, whereas something that might have been slightly flawed would have passed as a 10 in the past, maybe now that the volume is up so much, they don't need to give that flawed card a 10 anymore. So that's also weeding out a lot of the cards that aren't getting 10s these days, whereas they might have in the past. So it makes a lot of sense to me just based on volume alone that they must be getting right now.
Brennan, is it out there? Is it known? Do they tell you, these are the 10 things we look for, and it's graded on a certain scale, and it's like an average, Well, now it's a 9, and it's a 9.6. We round up to a 10. How do they come up with these numbers? Is it known out there? Do they put it out there how they exactly grade everything?
So BGS actually does give you subgrades if you pay for that service, which I actually prefer. I think that's a really nice feature because you can tell based on the 4 things they grade, which are corners, surface, edges, and centering, you can tell what was off and what wasn't. And so it'll actually give you a subgrade on each of those and then an overall grade. So you could have a mix of 9s and 10s and have it come out to be a 9.5. So that's really nice. BGS will tell you what exactly cost, what exactly made up that overall grade. PSA does not do that. And as far as I know, you can't find that out even if you look it up on their site. So that's just another example of why BGS might actually be able to take over some traction here if these things hold true. Because I agree with you in the sense that I'd love to know why exactly my card got what it got. And in fact, I've been saying offline, I don't think I've ever covered it on the show, I'd love for one of these companies to just come out with a report. So they send you a 1-page report about what exactly they saw on the card and why it got the grade it did. I think that would improve the integrity. It would improve the trustability of these sites. And BGS is already kind of doing that with the 4 subgrades they give you. But as far as PSA is concerned, they have said that they're willing to go 60-40 on the centering. So they're a little bit more lenient on the centering. But outside that, we don't really know what they would grade a 9 corner versus a 9.5 corner or a 10 corner, and so on and so forth with edges and surface. So it's kind of a mystery. And some people think if you catch the wrong person on the wrong day, you're going to get a different grade than if you catch them on a good day. So that's also not a good thing. But I want to give PSA and the rest of the companies the benefit of the doubt here. They're also forced to become more mature as the market has kind of exploded. And so not only are they dealing with increased volumes, they're dealing with increased scrutiny. And so rather than focus on kind of some things that have happened in the past or some shortcomings now, I think we got to focus on how they adapt. And the one that adapts the best, I think, is going to be in a really good position if the growth keeps up over the next few years.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's important to remember it's not a robot that's grading your car. It's a real life person. And they have feelings and who knows what they're doing that day. And some might be a little more stringent than others. Who knows? I mean, obviously they have their guidelines, and there's no way of, directing it to a certain specific person. It's kind of interesting. And you mentioned about, the modern cards, and you mentioned the Luka card, all these cards that are 10s. It's 2020. We can make cards, and obviously cards from the 80s and the 90s, they get beat up over the years and things like that. So it's understandable those cards are not going to be 10s, at least the large majority of them. But, we have the technology to make a pretty looking card and they get out the blotches and you have it centered and all that. Is that somehow sort of factored in? And my other question was, would the companies, I guess they wouldn't come out and admit this, but they could manipulate it and intentionally make cards that aren't 10s? Is that something that intense? Because, I don't think you'd want to do that, but maybe make the 10s more desirable. Is that something that people have talked about? Do you understand? Does that make sense what I'm asking?
Yeah, I think it makes sense. There has been speculation that the companies might try to turn down the knob on the QC to allow some 9s and 8s through.
Yeah.
Now, that being said, I still think that a big part of it, like you said, is that modern there's just better printing technology. So, of course, the gem rates are going to be higher. A lot of them are getting put into sleeves and top loaders right after they're pulled out of a pack, where in the past you might have had a shoebox full of some old 80s and 90s cards. So that's absolutely part of it. And I do think we should expect that modern cards will grade out better, just the way the hobby is trained now to protect the value and the technology is up. So I think it's on the grading companies to figure out if they need 2 separate scales, because you'll see some PSA 8s and PSA 7s of vintage cards that probably you wouldn't even touch if they were a modern card. And so it's got to be a tough dance for them to try to grade everything on one scale. It almost sounds like they might need different scales, or, maybe the companies should be, QCing some of it. But then again, Panini and Topps and all of them, they're not really focused on the grading side of it. I mean, obviously that's good for them because it creates buzz in the industry, but they're really focused on making sure they have enough product out, but not too much, and that the products that they're releasing are likable because they make all their money up front. It's not like I got to send money back to Panini or Topps if I get a 10, right? So, once it leaves the shop at PSA or Panini and Topps, I'm sure they probably care a lot less than what they're actually printing out. But could they maybe decrease the quality to increase speed? That's absolutely the case, and they might be okay with that, given the way the grading economy is working.
When you're looking to buy a card, how much do you prioritize? And of course, everything's relative. The price is sort of baked into, and if the card is raw, it's probably going to be cheaper as well. But BGS, PSA, how much does it have to be a certain grading system, or it's all based upon what the price is?
A lot of it's personal preference. I almost never go SGC, although I almost find it interesting if it's the same card, just in a different case. Maybe that's a long-term opportunity in the market, right? It's, if you're buying, I don't think SGC grades easier than either of the companies. In fact, they have a 9.5 to fall back on. So I kind of feel like a 10 is probably a 10 there. So I think long-term, SGC might be an interesting arbitrage, just because worst case scenario, you crack it open and probably get a very high percentage at PSA if you resubmit those cards. That being said, for short-term flips, I almost exclusively stay in PSA. PSA is much more popular for modern cards than it is for BGS. And so when people look to kind of quote their card or get a price target, they're using PSA. And so you kind of want to be in that infrastructure. If you're buying things low and trying to sell them high, the more someone has to work to try to correlate a BGS to a PSA, they're probably just going to go with the safety and the clarity of a PSA. Now, for cards in my PC, I actually am starting to pick up more BGS. And the reason why is because I love those subgrades. I'm seeing some 10s where it's clearly off center, where there's a dinged corner. And while it's okay to be slightly flawed and still get a 10, if BGS tells me, okay, well, the centering's a 10, the corner's a 9, and everything else is 9.5s, at least I know why that card got that grade. And I think it's a higher class case. I actually think the BGS case, it's a little bit thicker, but it kind of looks fancier. So if I'm putting something on a shelf, I think the BGS actually looks better. So obviously if I can get the same card for a discount going PSA or BGS, I'll go with the cheaper card. But there is pros and cons to both. For liquidity's sake, I think PSA is the clear choice for right now.
Simon, you have a thought on that?
Yeah, I mean, Dean, I know as an old school investor, old school card collector, you like having them in your hand and feeling the difference between them. You can definitely feel the difference between a PSA and a BGS case for sure. And I'm with Brennan on the 4 subgrades too. I like looking for those that have, maybe a couple 10s or whatever on the subgrades, but are selling for the same price that maybe all for like 3 9.5s and a 9 might sell for. So you can tell which ones are a higher quality card just based on those subgrades, and you can try to target those when you're looking for good values.
All right, Simon, your final thoughts as far as this conversation?
No, I'm with Brennan. I think I wouldn't be surprised if PSA was increasing the standards on these grading. And I think it's a good thing because there's a huge volume going into the market right now for cards getting graded and whatnot. And like we were talking about, like the hobby itself is exploding. So anything that they can do to increase the scarcity of certain cards to help out the value and help out people who are looking to buy the graded cards on eBay or ComC or Star Stock or whatever. It's better in general for the market. Like, we don't want overprinting. We don't want too many 10s on the market. We don't want that stuff. So anything that they can do to increase scarcity is a good thing in my mind.
All right, Brandon, put a bow on this. And like, assuming your premise is true, how do I best use that to my advantage?
Yeah. So I think for us to use it to our advantage, I think we definitely have to focus on 10s moving forward if it's in our price range, because we're seeing this with vintage cards. 10s are just more valuable than 9s, actually more so than the 3x multiplier. So if you're looking to buy a Jordan or some of these older vintage cards, the Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, those 10s are a lot harder to get than 9s, and therefore they're priced accordingly. So I think going forward, we need to focus on 10s if it fits our budget. And the Market Movers tool is great for that because you can actually look at the ratios, and I'm going to be tracking those closely over time. And if we start to see 10s slowly creep up past 3, more consistently closer to 4, I think that's data that we have to use. I think more importantly, because the market is relatively efficient in sports cards, so the market will price in these things pretty quickly. I think more importantly, we can't just send in everything now. If our percentage chance of getting a 10 is coming down 10, 15, 20%, that's inherently going to impact your ROI. And in fact, it could also drive raw prices down, because you have to think that a raw card is valued based on the percentage, what the value of the 10 and the 9 is if you're going to get it graded. And so if there's a lower chance at the higher valuation, the raw prices are going to come down as well. So I think being careful about holding raw right now, because the prices could go down. And also just being careful about what you send. If you can flip something short-term for a small profit raw, that's probably safer than sending it into a PSA or one of these other grading companies that might be tightening up their standards. And then lastly, one thing I didn't think about before the call, but you've got me thinking, maybe we need to start looking at the BGS market and how it stacks up to PSA. Because if the percentage chance of getting a 10 is coming down, but my chances of getting a BGS 9.5 are the same, that would mean that the BGS 9.5 is going to be a more viable option for cards that are on the fence. If I think I have a gem mint, I'm still sending it into PSA because the 10 value should be going up. But if I'm on the fence of a card, maybe I set it in a BGS pile or flip it raw for a smaller profit.
You mentioned the market mover tool. We're going to be showing that off later on in the show, and you guys, you're going to watch it. Say, how do I get a hold of this? How do I use this for myself? You go to sportscardinvestor.com, SCI. You get 20% off your first payment at SCI using the promo code Grinders, GRINDERS. Simon's going to be showing that off a little bit later on in the show, and we're talking about some football and basketball players specifically. Before we talk about that, Simon, there's a brand new setup there. NFL Mosaic has popped up, and I believe you're going to be screen sharing this one as well. The cards look beautiful, do they not?
Yeah, so it's supposed to come out this week, I believe. It's been kind of weird with these release dates lately. You expect them to be there 1 week, and then they don't end up in the stores, and you have to wait another week or two before they show up. But like recently, these last week or so, they've been popping up in Targets in random states. So I think they should probably get a wide release this week. I'm guessing at Target, hopefully Target and Walmart, but we'll see how that works out. I know the early sightings have been at Target, but these cards are beautiful looking cards. I'm doing a screen share right now. We can take a look at this Drew Brees card, for instance. This is just a base card, and the base cards look nice too. But Mosaic has been an NBA brand for Panini for the past couple seasons or so. And this past season with the Zion and Ja class, it was a pretty successful retail brand this year. Like there was a lot of demand for the blaster boxes, and there was a lot of demand for the cards themselves too. Like the cards were going on the secondary market and driving the prices of the retail boxes up much higher than they were selling for originally. So it's good to have this in NFL because we haven't had a nice looking NFL card in quite a while. So there's a lot of anticipation for this to hit the shelves, and we're looking right now at some of these cards. You can see some of these inserts, this montage of Saquon Barkley, very nice looking card. Center stage with Lamar Jackson, very nice looking card again. And the autograph cards look really good too. They're not an on-card autograph, unfortunately, but they still are very nice looking cards. So I think that this is going to be a popular release when it comes out. We just had 2020 Donruss released last week or the week before, and that was flying off the shelves. The resale value on the blaster boxes and the packs and mega boxes and whatnot haven't been that great with Donruss, but it's more of a paper product. It's not one of these higher end cards like Mosaic. So I think Mosaic will do better as far as resale. But in general, the cards that we're looking at here, I think the inserts and the variants and whatever are going to have some nice resale value, especially on a rookie class like we have this year with Joe Burrow, Tua. We got a bunch of wide receivers. We got a bunch of running backs this season that are just super popular. Here's another card I wanted to show you. This is just a beautiful looking card. This is a red DeAndre Hopkins Mosaic card. It goes with his uniform, obviously, now that he's on Arizona, but this kind of just gives you a look at the quality of this product and what you can expect to hit the shelves, hopefully in the next week or two. So we'll see.
Burrow looks legit. I'm not somebody like that makes a decision on like one game or 2 games or whatever, but he looks awesome. I don't watch a lot of college football. I'm an NFL guy. College football, not so much. I dabble here and there, but I think that's a card you're going to want to grab. You mentioned, Simon, the autograph is not on the card. What's up with that? Is that something that they do sometimes?
Yeah, sometimes they'll have the player autograph a sticker, and then whoever will stick the sticker onto the card. So it's not like the player had the card in their hand and they signed it personally. It's more they signed a bunch of stickers, sent it into Panini, and then Panini put it on whichever cards they needed to.
Yeah.
So you can see, like you can tell which cards are the on-card cards versus the sticker cards. As you can see in the screen share right here, we're looking at this Derrick Henry autograph card. When you see, just the basic outline of the sticker, you can see it pretty easily on the card. But if this was on card, it would look, you wouldn't have that shaded area there.
Brennan, I know you're more of an NBA guy than an NFL guy, but your thoughts on this general concept? Of course, like Mosaic has done NBA cards in the past, and I'm sure you have thoughts on those. And just generally, the business expanding. Is this good? Is it bad? What are your thoughts?
So absolutely. So I think in basketball, we're reaching to the point where there might be too many products. And I think anything that has been released really since Optic, I believe in 2016, I think is the first year. Like anything after that is at risk of being forgotten in the future if the hobby does contract. I think there's, as we saw in 2012, there's only 3 main sets in the Hoops, Select, and Prism. And then as we've gone on, we've introduced more and more. And I think the more that you introduce, the more that some will be forgotten in the future. Now, Mosaic Football, unlike Mosaic Basketball, I was down on Mosaic Basketball because we've got about 8,000 other products out. Football is still a relatively young market. And so if it can take hold, it'll fall behind Optic, Prism, and Select, but it still might land in that 4 or 5 area, which I think is good for a hobby that has decent amount of hype around it. When you start getting to be the 8th, 9th, 10th best set, you start to run the risk of relying heavily on a hyped up market. Now, I am typically a basketball guy, but I want to point a couple of things out on this Cardboard Connection site that Simon was showing over. It has a great breakout of the product as an investor. So I probably won't break any of this because I just don't break wax to begin with. Because I guess I don't like fun. I just like money. But if I were to invest in football, and I might, the first thing I'm going to look at is what's hobby only versus what's in retail product. Because as we know, hobby sells less. There's just less sales volume because it's not available at Walmart and Target and Meijer and anywhere else. And it's got a breakdown of the hobby only parallels. So those are some things that I'd be looking at. The 2 that are jumping out to me right now is the No Huddle Silver, which I guess No Huddle is a certain type of hobby box. So that's hobby only, Mosaic Red, and then Mosaic Peacock. So those are 3 parallels that I'm going to automatically be looking for because the market might not be quick enough to realize that there's going to be less of those parallels out there than, say, a camo pink or an orange fluorescent that are available in retail, because there's just going to be more retail product that happens in every other sport, every other product. The other thing I noticed in this breakout of the product is rookie variation cards. So I actually just picked up, I just got back from PSA, a Ja Morant rookie variation for his Prism card. And it is about 1/10 the population of the base rookie card for Ja Morant. And so it says here, rookie variation cards are in hobby, no huddle boxes, and retail hanger boxes. So if I'm someone that is breaking wax and I want to try to get a base rookie that's more rare than what we're going to see in the market for the actual base, then I'm looking for those rookie variations. It's typically just a different photo of the main base card. So if I were to break into football, and maybe I will just as a change of pace, I'm probably going to be targeting these hobby-only parallels and these rookie variation cards. And I do that with any basketball set as well. I read the breakout that Cardboard Connection provides, and I look for those arbitrage opportunities. I think this is great for football. I think, like I said, basketball probably has enough product. But if football continues to grow, people are going to be targeting this set because it'll be the first Mosaic. 5 years from now, if football's booming and basketball's kind of holding steady, people are going to say, man, I want to go get that Lamar Jackson first Mosaic card. I mean, it's going to happen. If football takes off like basketball did, people are going to want the first Prism, the first Select, the first Mosaic. So this could be an interesting time to get into football with a product that I do think looks really fun. It looks like a really good product.
There you go. Some good information. Let's move on. Let's talk about let's see, Simon. Let's see if we can take some victory laps or say, hey, maybe we were wrong on this thing or that thing. Some NFL players that we were recommending on previous shows to invest in. And you kind of sort of possibly maybe got laughed at when you talked about Mr. Trubisky. But Mitchell Trubisky, do the victory lap or not? I'm not really sure where it's at, to be honest. He's had a nice game against Detroit. Trubisky, how are his cards looking? I know you're going to do a screen share now for the people.
Yeah, Trubisky's a name that we've been talking about for a couple months now. A lot of people were buying into Nick Foles as being the starter, and I never bought into that. Like, I'm a Nick Foles fan. Don't get me wrong. I'm an Eagles fan, and he won us a Super Bowl. But in general, he had a stretch of a few good games, and I just did not buy into him being the anointed starter in Chicago, especially with the draft capital they had in Trubisky. And I just didn't see them giving up on Trubisky at this point yet. He had a good season a couple years ago, and then last year he was a complete dud. So I just didn't see them giving up on him that soon. But as you can see from the charts, back when we were recommending it, it was probably around $40 or so. Chief was big on it too. Chief and I were talking behind the scenes about it a lot too, and scooping some Trubisky cards. It sounds ridiculous, I know, but it's like I just did not see him not going into the season as the starter, and so it was like kind of an easy guy to pick up. But we were buying it for about under $50 at the time, talking about the Optic Hollow PSA 10. And as you can see from this chart, the most recent sales were going for around 149. So that's a nice triple on that card price. So I think I have one. I think I'm going to flip it and just take my money and run, because at this point now, I think we've seen maybe a potential ceiling for him. So I don't know if he can continue winning these games. And at this point, I've made enough of a profit where I don't need to take that. I don't need to wait and see.
Yeah, of course, you're showing off the market movers tool we kind of referenced before. If you guys want access to it, get yourself 20% off your first payment at sportscardinvestor.com by using the promo code Grinders, GRINDERS. And I said Trubisky was good. Like, it was great again, the Trubisky scale. Like, he was perfectly fine, I guess, and a good box score, at least the first game against Detroit. And hey, they're 2-0, and why not? Triple your money and get out and move on.
Yeah.
Talk to me about the Dak Prescott, who had he had 3 rushing touchdowns this last week. It was ridiculous. That whole game was ridiculous. They beat Atlanta. Atlanta's just had suspension for giving up 25-point leads, not understanding how onside kicks work. Dallas, I think, won that game 40-39, something egregious. It was a high score. A lot of fun. Yeah. You were on Dak, of course, at the beginning of the year. Where is Dak at right now? And I don't know if the card market reflects what happened on Sunday. It's probably still a little early for that. But how are we looking as far as Prescott?
I'd just like to add to that Market Movers plug. I would recommend signing up for the annual subscription. You're getting 20% off an entire year versus if you only did 1 month, you get 20% off a month, because that's 20% off your first payment on any subscription. So I definitely recommend doing the annual for that, and make sure you're doing Market Movers, because Market Movers is the actual subscription where you're going to get access to all these tools and charts and stuff. If you just do a regular subscription, you're getting articles. But if you do market movers, you're getting the articles and you're getting all these great tools that you can use to hunt down these cards. Dak Prescott, we're looking at his 2016 Prism Silver PSA 10. This particular year of Prism, there was silver was the base too, so there isn't a base card. There's only the silver variation for some of these rookies. But looking at this chart, it looks like he was going straight up. He was up to 1425. We recommended it originally when it was around 325, 350. So it's made a nice run up to 1425. I'm still holding on to mine because I think it could potentially be a blockbuster year for him. He showed that potential in this second game, rushing for all those touchdowns and pulling out the win at the last minute. It got a little bit hairy there for a minute. I might sell my BGS 9.5 just to make my money back on all the Dak cards that I bought. But yeah, I mean, recently it took a little dive. That's probably a result of his week one loss from the 16th of September down to the 18th of September. It went from that 1425 price point down to about 1,000, and it's been kind of plateauing there. I wouldn't be surprised if a few days from now we start to see it creeping back up again. I don't think it's going to jump directly back up to that 1,400 point. I think if he wins a few more games, he'll get this chart looking good again. But for now, it's a nice profit over what we originally recommended it at for sure.
What do you have for me on Deshaun Watson? 0-2, of course, two really tough games out the gate. Taking on Kansas City, taking on Baltimore, getting the L in both of those. Mm-hmm. We'll talk about Hopkins in a second. He lost his best receiver, obviously. Fuller did not catch a pass in week 2. He was kind of dinged. I think he had a hammy or something like that. He was out there for some snaps, but just whatever reason, I don't know if he was a distraction or just trying to give it a go, but wasn't 100%. So he's 0-2 for Houston. What do we think of him going forward? What's the card market reflecting as far as the current performance?
Yeah, we're looking at his 2017 Prism PSA 10 and his 2017 Optic Hollow PSA 10s. We were buying them. We were recommending the buy when the prices were plateauing. The prices had been plateauing from about the end of July through a few weeks ago. Most recently, the 12th of September is probably where it was on that flat line. Then it started to take a little bit of a dive. I think the realization that he doesn't have any weapons, and he's had 2 really tough matchups to start the season, losing to Kansas City and then losing to Baltimore. So I don't think the schedule has favored him as far as his card prices and performance go. But don't be surprised if when the schedule eases up a bit and the performances start coming out of him and maybe he starts to gel. You already saw him starting to gel more with Brandon Cook in this most recent game that they played. Cooks looked really good and was catching balls from him. And Fuller put up a goose egg, but Fuller's kind of hit or miss in general. So we'll see how things work out with his receivers. He's obviously hurt without having Hopkins on the team, but maybe one of these other receivers can pull out a good season and help the team out. But right now, I think the price is reflecting things dawning on people of the team does not look very good right now. So hopefully an easier stretch of schedules will help help those prices out.
All right, talk to you about the former Texan, the current Cardinal in Arizona now. DeAndre Hopkins quickly became Kyler Murray's favorite target. No surprise there. 22 catches for the first 2 games, over 219 yards, got in the box as well too. And I believe Arizona is 2-0, if I'm not mistaken. Hopkins, what do you have for me?
Yeah, Kyler Murray's looking like a stud, and they gelled instantly with DeAndre Hopkins. That's kind of what we were predicting, just because Hopkins in the past, he played with a scrap heap of quarterbacks in Houston before he got to Deshaun Watson, and the guy's been a stud his entire career. We're looking at his 2013 Topps Chrome PSA 10 card. I think we were recommending it around this 150 price point or so. It had been kind of hovering around there for a little while. but now we're looking at a card that's going for about $300 at his most recent sale. And, that's one that, like I said, he instantly had a connection with Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray's looking really good. That whole team's looking good. They beat San Francisco in week 1, so that was a tough defense that they were able to pull it out. We kind of projected that too, because last year the Cardinals played San Francisco pretty well for the 2 times that they faced off each other last season. So it was kind of a foreshadowing that they might have a chance to beat San Francisco in week 1, and they did that, and then they pulled off another win this past week. And Hopkins has looked good in both of those games, so it looks like he's going to continue being a stud wide receiver for the near future.
All right. Lastly, as far as the NFL, we'll talk NBA in a second. Odell Beckham Jr. Been pretty quiet so far this year. He did score a touchdown on national TV that Thursday night game, for what it's worth, but wasn't a spectacular game per se. On the season so far, he still has less than 100 yards in 2 games. Where is the card market reflecting the recent performance of Odell Beckham?
Beckham's another one that we were recommending based on ease of schedule. The schedules for the Browns is going to be pretty easy this year, and he has a good he's healthy this year. He hasn't shown yet too good of a connection with Baker, but like in week 2, they connected on a long touchdown. So it looks like there's signs that they could be getting a good connection between them. So hopefully that continues, but it might be a good time to invest in Beckham now. His prices have been kind of all over the place these last few days or couple weeks or so. And right now they're kind of, they're down a little bit. We're looking at this 2014 Topps Chrome PSA 10 base card. That's going for around $82 right now. At its peak, it was at about $139, but I don't know how many sales that was. That might have been light volume. But, I think it's probably a good time to buy because I think the Browns are heading into an easy stretch of schedules. They had who they play week 1? Was it Baltimore?
I'm pulling it up on the fly here. Yeah, Baltimore week 1, Cincinnati week 2, Washington, Dallas, Indianapolis, Pittsburgh, Cincy, Vegas.
Right. So the only tough competition they have in the next few weeks is Pittsburgh. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Beckham just starting to pick up with Baker and those two forming a really, really good connection over the next few weeks and see him start to look like his old form. Like I said, like they're healthy again. They got good coaching this year, and Baker looked really good in week 2 as well. So it was a good matchup between him and Burrow. They took an early lead and they started going more towards the run game. So Baker didn't throw as high a volume as we would want, but I think if some of these games stay competitive, then they'll have a good shot to put up some stats.
All right, Brandon, before we dive in and talk about NBA players, I did want to ask you sort of what the general market's doing, because my understanding is NFL cards are generally going up with the NFL season, 2 weeks in, kind of kicking in. NBA is winding down. The general NBA market is down. What do we do with that information? Confirm that. And what do we do with that? And then we're going to talk about some players specifically.
Yeah, we don't have a great overall market indicator like you would say in the stock market with like an S&P 500 or a Dow Jones. But what we are seeing is the market is still going down slightly, but at a slower rate. So I think what we're actually seeing in a lot of cases, and a lot of the cards we're going to look here at in a second, you can start to see like a bottoming out and it's starting to kind of reverse course. So I have a feeling that this is with really probably any player. At the very end of their season, you're going to see the dip. And then once it gets to a certain point, savvy buyers will start to buy them back up. And so the whole market kind of went down because basically everybody before teams was eliminated in the course of a couple of weeks. And it kind of dragged the whole market down with it. What you're seeing is the players that are still in the bubble playing are going up, actually trending back the right direction. And people that are out of the bubble, like Ben Simmons or Trey Young, you're starting to see them kind of bottom out and like be stagnant. So the overall market, I think, is still probably trending downwards slightly. That being said, I think the most of the pain that we're going to feel is already past us, and we're going to start to see them reverse course, especially as the finals end, and then you start to get news about the draft and potential trades and free agency. And so that's going to get the buzz hype machine going again. And everyone's going to think, man, let me get my cards now to sell them at the beginning of the season. So it's a cyclical thing. We're bottoming out right now. And I think in the next month or so, you're going to really start to see evidence that we're headed in the right direction, barring any major economic. Like, we have to keep in mind, I know I say this on every show, we've got an election coming up. We've got stimulus arguments going on every day. Like, we can't control that. The card market can't control any of that. Unfortunately, cards don't put a roof over your head or put food on the table. So as long as the overall economy holds intact, at least for the most part, I think we're going to start to see this bottom out and head back in the other direction, because we got a lot of new people focused on football right now. That focus will shift eventually back into basketball. So I'm pretty optimistic about where we're headed, and I think the worst is behind us for a lot of these cards.
By the way, on previous shows, talking about how the target date for the new NBA season was around Christmas. There's no official date, but somebody in the comment section mentioned that Mark Cuban mentioned on a podcast that they threw out the date Martin Luther King Day, January 18th. So again, we don't know, but that Cuban knows more than I do, and assuming that that's true, maybe it's too optimistic to think that it's going to be around Christmas, and that would be really, really soon, obviously. But just kind of stay tuned on that. We'll see when the new season comes around. You talk about some guys that are out of the bubble now. Do you want to kind of go through them individually? I'm not sure if we have charts as far as this, but like Ben Simmons, and there's a lot of question marks on Simmons. Like, will he be on Philadelphia next year? And, depending on where he lands, is it an up or is it a down? I would assume. Well, we'll see. You tell me. Will he be on Philadelphia next year is the first question, I suppose.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So one of my favorite conspiracy theories is that Minnesota is putting together a package to trade for Ben Simmons that includes the first overall pick. And the reason why I like it is because I think that's actually a great fit. You've got two guys around him that can shoot relatively well. And D'Angelo Russell, playing in Golden State for at least part of last year, learned to play off the ball a little bit. So, like, I think that he will be on Philadelphia. The reason why I think he'll start the year on Philadelphia is it's just a weird offseason as it is. The teams have barely even had a chance to interview prospects and figure out what they're going to do in the draft, to try to also then organize these types of trades in such a weird year with all of the family things I'm sure they have going on. I just don't think we're going to see any big trades in the offseason. Again, I don't have a crystal ball for any of this. But I think they're going to run it back because, look, I know they had Jimmy Butler last year, but they were almost in the finals. I mean, this concept was working until they traded out Butler for Horford. So if they can make a similar swap out that doesn't involve the two big guys, maybe they try to run it back. But that being said, as far as his market is concerned, we had suggested starting to look at him, I think 3 or 4 shows ago. He's still coming down. So I bought slightly early and I bought some more after that. But I'm starting to see a lot of his cards kind of bottom out. We're showing on the screen right now his Prism Silver. It's going to be a tough one to look at from a bottoming out perspective because there's only 129 of them total in the world. For his base cards that have a higher population, you're starting to see them bottom out a little bit more for Prism and for Select. But I love Ben Simmons because he's still young. He's a jump shot away from being a legitimate MVP candidate. And you can't imagine they're just going to try this Philly thing for the next 10 years. Eventually, it might not be next year. Eventually, he's going to be in a better situation. We've seen stars get into better spots, and I believe he's a star in the league. And so I think Ben Simmons is a medium to long-term buy. But you're getting the same prices you would have gotten early July, which is really good news because all of the hype kind of hit when the bubble started. So as I see things kind of drop past their July prices, I really like to start looking at picking them up. And I think now might be a good time to start looking at Ben Simmons. And the market movers is really nice because you can see if there's 3 or 4 days where it's held at a similar level. If that's the case, it could still go down in the future. There could be a double drop. But for the most part, if you can drop at pretty significant levels and then hold for 3-4 days or a week, that means we're probably to the point where it'll start going up at some point, if not just stay stagnant for a little while.
Yeah, a couple things. We've been saying about Simmons for a long time as far as just being a jump shot away. And, I know we've seen him do it in, practice and warm-ups. It does not do it in the games for whatever reason. It's so odd. Yeah. I think he's capable of hitting him at a decent percentage, but who knows? The other thing is, say, I was going to ask, hey, maybe it's an interesting idea to invest in Karl Anthony Towns. If you bet on the comment, bet on thinking that Simmons is going to be there. But then my second thought was Simmons, Cat, Russell, and then a bunch of guys. Does that team really compete in the West? The West is really good, and I still don't think they get there. Maybe they'll make the playoffs, probably, but they're probably a first-round knockout. I don't know. Thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't think that Cat, Ben Simmons, and D'Angelo Russell is anything more than maybe a 5 or a 6 seed. Mm-hmm. That seems very much like the ceiling of a Utah Jazz. You've got a great wing player and a good big man, and then a bunch of other pieces. That being said, I'm a huge fan of Malik Beasley. The guy can scorch it from outside. So if you put Beasley, Russell, and Towns around, and Hernan Gomez from Denver, who actually is a decent shooter himself, you've got one of those classic really good regular season teams that just kind of fall apart in the postseason. So if that happens, I'm definitely looking to sell at the height of the hype from a regular season perspective. I would not take a Minnesota team without another piece, or at least some more proven statistics, as a potential title favorite. So
also, what if Culver's good? He might be part of that package for the record. He might be right. the guy getting moved out. But what if he's good? I don't know. I'm not ready to say he's not good. I'm not ready to say he's good for sure.
Yeah.
Right now it's not looking great, but he's still 20 years old, 21 years old.
Yep. Yeah. No, and I'm trying to think to myself if a team built around Russell, Anthony Edwards, Karl Anthony Towns, and some other pieces is worth even a look at Towns. Because I suggested Towns a while back, partly as a play for him getting out of Minnesota at some point. Now, if they put together something reasonable around him, that might not actually help his case, but hurt it more. Because Towns' stats are very similar to Anthony Davis's at this point in his career. So he's a very good player that we just kind of forget about because Minnesota's just been awful. So Towns is an interesting gamble right now. It's definitely speculative. But if Ben Simmons landed there, whether or not we think it's a good idea or not, their prices are going to go up because we're all going to dream about the perfect scenario where now Ben Simmons turns it around and Minnesota becomes the next Denver Nuggets.
At least from the start, before the season starts, I would imagine the cards would be going up, right? Just betting on the potential promise or the, just potential in general. Yep. Talk to me about Trey Young, who's on a bad Atlanta team. They are young. The team's young. I wasn't trying – that just sort of worked out that way. In theory, they're going to be getting better.
Yeah.
I think he's a fun player to have in the league. I think he's a little bit limited. He's not a great – he doesn't do anything besides score. He's a good passer too. He's a terrible defender, which I don't think he's going to get much better at that. We'll see. You tell me I'm wrong on that.
Yeah, I think you're wrong on this. Okay. For one, there's a lot of young pieces there. So you had rookies in Reddish and Hunter, both playing huge minutes, as well as Kevin Huerter, who was a sophomore. You also had I think the second best player. I think one of the most underrated players in the league, John Collins, was suspended for most of the season. And you're just trying to build – I know they're trying to build something that resembles Golden State. I actually don't think it can happen because I think you kind of undersold his passing ability. I actually think he's one of the 5 best passers in the league.
Good passer.
Yeah, great. I mean, I don't even think good. I think he's if you actually look at the stats and watch him on film, he does things like Chris Paul where he'll look away defenders and then put no-look passes right on the money. I mean, it's just insane. You did address the elephant in the room, which he's maybe the worst defender in the league, and that's really hard to cover up. So they're going to have the window to build a team around Trey Young like it was for Steph Curry is much, much smaller because Curry, one, is the greatest shooter of all time, but also a slightly below average defender, not league worst. That being said, I don't think the card market cares about any of that, at least for the first 5 years of Trey Young's career. They're going to see the 50-point games. They're going to see the logo three-pointers, and they're going to see, I think, Atlanta in a soft Eastern Conference become one of those middle-tier teams. And I think that's all you're going to need for his cards to kind of spike up in value. I really like Trey Young from an offensive perspective. I think he'll go down as one of – you could probably argue he'll be a top 50 offensive player. It's in the cards, maybe even higher. I agree with you. I don't know if he's a championship player unless all of the things fall correctly. That being said, we're seeing him come off his peak a little bit. You can see here on the screen, he was up over 2,000, and he's now dropped closer to 1,600. And you're seeing similar in his lower cards as well, like his select concourse PSA cards and also his Prism base. So I think now's a good time to pick up Trey Young because he's going to be another guy you target to sell after the hype gets high. Atlanta might start the year hot. He might have a couple of 40, 50-point games. And that, as we saw in the bubble, that's going to drive his prices. So Trey, again, is not one of those players that you hold hoping he wins the title. But I think as a long-term hold, if you think he'll be the next Steph Curry, or as a hold to kind of sell as like a Damian Lillard, he gets hot for a week and you sell, I think Trey Young's a great buy now. I think the market, though, just tends to like him. He's like a market darling because he hasn't dropped all that much, considering he wasn't even in the bubble to play in the first place. So, Trey is kind of a high-risk, high-reward play, but I don't see the hype slowing down anytime soon. I think we'd have to wait a few more years into his career where we really start to question, is he good enough to actually win?
Yeah, and that's kind of what I was getting at. I mean, obviously, he's a lot of fun to root for. Well, it seems like a perfectly likable guy. Great for highlights, like you said. As far as players and highlights, he's great for that. And like you said, he will have those spike games where he does put up 50 points and just hit like 10 threes, which is a lot of fun. And the highlights, who cares if he's getting burned on defense? And card collectors don't care about that stuff. I'm curious how Capella's going to work. They traded for Capella, and he's there for several years. I think he never played a game with them because of injury, maybe some PNR. We saw it with Harden and Capella all the time back there in Houston. Of course, Capella doesn't really fit the 2020 mold of basketball players because he can't shoot, which is somewhat concerning. But, you mentioned Collins. Collins is one of those big men that can step out and shoot as well. He's been inconsistent. I'm just kind of looking at their roster. I think Herter's fine. I don't think he's special. I think Reddish is fine, but he's 21. Who knows what Reddish is going to be? So I don't know where they're going to go. That's what I was speaking to. I don't think this current iteration, I don't think it's going to go very far for Atlanta. They got to change some things around, but maybe I'm wrong. You had some thoughts on that. It sounded like you had some thoughts on that. And then kind of bleed into what your thoughts are on Luka Doncic.
Sure. Yeah, so I'll put a bow on the Atlanta thing. John Collins is one of my big bets, and I like to look at guys off the court and in interviews to see if they have the requisite mindset to really succeed. And John Collins seems like a really well-spoken, hardworking dude with all of the raw talent. So I agree with you. He's been inconsistent, but with the suspension and some injuries early on in his career, I'm hoping that if for a year he can put it together, especially with a guy like Trey Young that'll make you just a better player in general, I expect a breakout coming for John Collins at some point. I just hope he's not the next Aaron Gordon, because Aaron Gordon was a similar way. We just kind of always saw the ceiling and just never got there. So it's a little bit of a big bet. As far as Capella is concerned, if they're building a Golden State clone, Golden State never ran their centers out there for much. So they'd start them and play them like 20 minutes. So I think you're going to see a lot of that where John Collins will start at the 4 and then move down for the 5 for majority of the game. So, I mean, Capella might be good for 20 minutes and in certain matchups he might play more. But I think you're going to see a lot of John Collins at the 5 next year. And I think that's a good thing because he spaces the floor and he's just as good of a lob threat. The guy can jump out of the gym. So I'm cautiously optimistic on the Hawks for next year, but definitely long term. As far as Luka Doncic is concerned, man, have his cards come down, and have they come down pretty fast. I was looking at his cards before the show, and they had actually dropped below the pre-bubble numbers. And so I think what had happened with Luka Doncic is because there's so many of his graded cards out there. As soon as someone saw 5, 6, 7 sales lower than what they wanted to get out of when they knew that the finish line was coming, it kind of just snowballed all the way down. And it also didn't help that he was already going up and then hit that buzzer beater, which just drove his prices up even more. So this is the general case of when there's certain momentum behind a stock or an asset that's falling, people start to panic. I just think this is panic selling, because I walked away from his playoffs thinking, okay, I thought he was going to be a certain type of good, and he's just going to be better than that. I mean, I'm convinced he's going to be one of the best 5 players in the league through his prime the entire time. I mean, it would be a surprise to me if he didn't win at least one, if not multiple MVPs, just with how, I mean, at his age, how he just looks like the best player on the court for long stretches, despite not being all that athletic, which was the biggest knock. And we also forget how much success he had in the EuroLeague at such a young age, which I know it's not the NBA, but for an 18 and 19-year-old to have that kind of success, it just tells you he's got a certain something about him. So I think this is a good time to load up on Luka. I've said for a long time I don't like his Prism cards. His Select cards are trading lower and are much lower populations. So right now I'm actually picking up Luka Select graded cards because they are falling just like the Prisms. And I mean, they are just laughably less from a population perspective. So that's my big buy right now is Luka Select cards as they continue to fall here.
You mentioned Luka and that buzzer beater. That segues us right into the next player. Anthony Davis and a buzzer beater beat Denver. And I felt bad a little for Jokic because Jokic had a phenomenal close in that game, just kept scoring everything. And that incredible read where he just tipped in the shot, basically got a rebound. The ball didn't hit the rim yet. And, it was just an awesome play. And then it's just sort of lost in history because of Anthony Davis banging a three and Mason Plumlee doing some weird defense. Couldn't really figure out I don't know. There was some confusion. Yeah. I guess they both wanted to cover LeBron, which kind of speaks to LeBron's greatness because LeBron's really, really good. And you have two guys on LeBron, nobody on Davis. That could be a problem as well, too, because Davis is awesome as well. And if you're going to build around a player for the next 5 years in the NBA, it's probably Luka or Davis, maybe Tatum, maybe Giannis. Those are probably the guys in the conversation. But Davis is a really, really good 1B, and he'll circumvent, he'll jump LeBron soon enough, in theory. What are Anthony Davis's cards doing? Of course, really, really good shot at winning a title there for the first time.
Yeah, I can't even explain to you what the market sees with these Anthony Davis cards. So the guy is, their path continues to get easier to winning a finals. And Anthony Davis, in theory, even after LeBron retires, is going to be the face of that franchise. And they're not going to have any problems getting big names to go play with him. So the fact that his cards peaked up around 3,900 and are now trading at about 2,000, almost a 50% decline for his Prism base PSA 10, it's laughable. Now, a couple of things I will say. The run-up from July 28th to about early August was a little bit ridiculous. So it was due to come back. But this is a classic case of just people panicking, right? As soon as we saw the first big drop for him in mid to late August, everyone else appears to have just panicked and sold as well. I think he's a great buy and a great buy now. If you have the money for his cards, you certainly can go a different route, like a Hoops. I haven't looked at that card. I assume it's followed a similar trend, which will be cheaper. But I don't exactly get why he went down as much as he did. Now, I will say this, as you saw on that chart, he hit the bottom and went right back up, whereas some of these other players are bottoming out. So I think people are realizing it. And yeah, we have the Hoops pulled up here. It's at a much lower price point, under 600 for a PSA 10. And it got all the way up to about 1,400 and is now selling at 560. It's unexplainable what exactly is going on because Anthony Davis, in my opinion, has a great chance at winning a title this year, at least a fair chance at winning multiple titles for the world's most marketable basketball team. And he's already he's not just a Robert Horry secondary player. He is a key player to that team and will be for a long time. So looking at these Hoops cards, it's kind of funny that it's where it's at. And I might start looking after the show at picking up some Anthony Davis because it's just silly that he fell. I can't really explain it other than people panicked. As soon as they saw it come down a little bit, the bubble burst. This is a classic example of a bubble bursting, but there being a clear avenue to a recovery and a quick recovery.
So should
you got me sold on getting an Anthony Davis.
There you go. Simon's getting excited over there. I knew I saw this came out the other day. 15 NBA talent evaluators, including 4 GMs, 6 execs, and 5 scouts were asked which player is under 25 they want to build around. So that's the caveat. And number 1 was Luka Doncic. Number 2 was Tatum. Number 3, Booker. I thought this was kind of weird, kind of scrolling down. Then John Morant, then Donovan Mitchell. Who haven't I said yet? Then Bam Adebayo, kind of still scrolling down. And then finally Zion. That's kind of weird how quick people turned on Zion. I know it wasn't a great bubble for him, but I don't know. Does that surprise you at all, Brennan?
No, I've always been pessimistic on Zion. And maybe it's not fair, but I guess my thing is there's a lot more risk there than I think a lot of people would recognize. I know that the talent is there for him, but not only do you have injury risks, which he's dealt with some injuries, but I wouldn't say he was like Anthony Davis early in his career, who we all thought was injury prone, and now he's one of the best investments you could make. But I go back to and I think we talked about this pre-show. I like to look at guys in interviews and on the court and what do their big moments look like. And Zion doesn't have enough of those moments for me where he's just just a beast on the court and he's looking like he just wants to embarrass whoever's in front of him. I know it looks that way because he's so athletic. But when you look at Ja Morant step back, hit a three over James Harden and say, I'm here, let him know I'm here, or something of the sort, that's the kind of thing that's going to take you from a great talent to a great player. Zion sometimes won't even rush to help his guys up off the court. He puts his hands on his hips. Maybe it's a conditioning thing. But I just think we need to see more from Zion. Yeah. He's young, and he's dealing with a lot of things off the court, as we know. But I think I need to see more from him before I anoint him in the top echelon of players. Right now, I think it's Giannis, Tatum, Luka, obviously, and then you could make a case for Mitchell. And then, after that, I would take Ja over Zion. If I started a team right now, I would take Ja over Zion, and I'd feel pretty good about it.
He feels safer, if nothing else. I would say he feels safer. Maybe Zion's got more upside. Well, where does Lillard rank for you? I'm curious. Where does Lillard rank for you on the talking smack and backing it up and just sort of the overall body language? He seems like a guy that would crush that score for you.
Oh yeah, I love the Dame time. Anytime you have a shtick like that,
bye.
Bye. Jamal Murray's got the blue arrow. I don't know if he pulled those out on in the bubble yet or not. But anytime you've got that sort of moxie, I just love it. The thing is, Damian Lillard continues it onto Twitter afterwards. So the guy just doesn't turn that mode off, which is good. Unfortunately, you got guys like Joe Ingles who are a little bit more subtle about their trash talk, but probably deserve more credit than they get. I love anytime a guy gets hyped like that on the court. And maybe if we start to see that from Zion, I'll feel a little bit differently. But right now, I just think the hype doesn't match what we're realistically looking at the moment.
Simon, I know you had some general thoughts as far as the NFL and the plethora of injuries we saw this weekend with CMC, with Saquon. CMC, I think, is going to be out. Christian McCaffrey is going to be out, 4 to 6 weeks. Saquon done for the year, unfortunately. Locke's dinged. San Francisco's all beat up. Cortland Sutton got hurt. Do you have any general thoughts on that and how it might reflect the market?
We definitely had some significant injuries over the past weekend, especially with Saquon and CMC and guys like that going down. I would just keep an eye on those card prices, because if you believe that they can come back from those injuries and be in their old form, and you see a significant dip in those card prices, might be a good opportunity to scoop them up. Especially Christian McCaffrey, I would keep a close eye on him. He had a high ankle sprain. We saw Kamara have the same injury last season, or a similar injury at least, and he came back and he just did not look the same for the rest of the season. So if something like that happens with McCaffrey and he comes back and he underperforms for the rest of the year, he might try to race back to get on the field like Kamara did last year and not give himself enough time to heal or whatever. But those high ankle sprains are tricky injuries, and they usually affect the player for a significant amount of time after they return, if they're returning after a couple weeks or 3 or 4 weeks or whatever it is. So I would not be surprised to see McCaffrey underperform on the season and have his card prices dropping as a result of that. And if you think he can recover for the following season, then he'd be a good one to look into scooping up.
Yeah, I was looking at the show sheet today, and I was like, well, today's going to be a short show. And it turns out it wasn't. We went kind of long. It just sort of works out that time. But that is the end of the show. Of course, before we step aside and get out of here, we do our mail day. Brennan, you do go ahead and tell us what you're showing off as far as your mail day card. And as you're doing that, give us your socials. Tell the people where they can find you out there in the old interwebs. And then, Simon, feel free to follow up after Brennan.
Sure. Yeah, speaking of Trey Young, I picked one up myself last week. Again, it's a select because I just think, especially for 2017 on, the population counts just don't justify where the prices are right now. So I'm exclusively select. I've been that way for a long time. You can find me on Twitter at the DFS Advisor, as well as Instagram. And you'll be able to I'm actually going to start using market movers on there to show you guys kind of real time behind the scenes how I like to look at these charts, because I think on Instagram that'll play very well. I try to stay off of Twitter for the most part nowadays because it's always dicey when you get in there. So for my blood pressure, I stay off of Twitter as much as I can.
Understood. Simon?
Yeah, you can find me at Yeti Boom Films on Twitter. I'm like Brennan. I try to be as scarce on Twitter as I can be, but I like to check in there for updates on NFL players and whatever. You see some of your favorite fantasy analysts talking about these players. That's pretty much what I use it for these days. But I would say follow us more in Discord on RG Discord in the Sports Card channel. That's probably a better place to get cordial conversations and good behavior. So you can jump in there and ask people about cards. We got Chief, we got Head Chopper, lots of guys that you recognize from RotoGrinders are in that channel talking about their sports cards and showing off their mail days and stuff. And for my mail day this week, I mentioned earlier I was able to find some Donruss 2020 out in the wild, and I had a little less discipline with these football cards than I normally do with the basketball cards. I usually try to flip the basketball cards I find on the market, but with football, me being a bigger football fan, I had no self-control. I ended up opening a whole bunch of these blaster boxes that I bought, and you can see the carcasses of all the cards that I was not successful with. And in the front of that, you will see the Jerry Jeudy autographed bronze Donruss 2020 card and a Joe Burrow canvas card, which I'm pretty happy with landing those. But as you can see, the return on investment to get a couple cards like that, you have to go through a lot of cards to get there. But I'm happy with those cards. I think I'm going to try and sell the Jerry Jeudy right now why it's pretty high, and I'm going to hold on to that Joe Burrow card.
You mentioned that Discord channel. I don't know if it's Discord or Slack, but Brennan's been helping me out. We're trying to figure out what LeBron James card I'm going to buy, and I appreciate that help, Brennan. We'll figure it out soon enough. Got to invest in some LeBron, possibly before he most likely wins another title. We'll see. Stay tuned on that. Of course, 4 teams left in the bubble. That said, I do want to say like and subscribe. We do appreciate that. Feel free to leave your comments in the comment section. One last time, the promo code for market movers we've been talking about, we've been showing off through the entire show, 20% off your first payment, your first subscription at SCI. You use the promo code Grinders. That said, for Simon, for Brennan, I was Dean. This was Sports Card Grinders. We're out of here. Holler? Holler?